The new movie, Christopher Robin, which comes out this month, tells an original story about the popular characters from A. Milne's children's stories, which were made even more popular by the animated interpretations by Disney. Admittedly, apart from a newspaper comic strip that ran in the 70s and 80s, Winnie the Pooh and his friends from 100 Acre Wood haven't had a huge impact on comics. Not so for Disney itself, whose contributions to the comics world were immediate and important. Walt Disney made a few cartoons before The Mouse Who Made Him Famous, from adaptations of Lewis Carroll's Alice character to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, whose ownership passed hands several times over the years. But it was in 1928, with the introduction of Mickey Mouse, that he finally made his mark. 2 Mickey cartoons were created and failed to impress, not finding a distributor, but the third, Steamboat Willie, put the mouse on the big screen, and both character and creator were on the path to legend. You know, with Disney being famous for its catchy songs, maybe this should be a musical review. Well, Jean, at last we see each other plain. Monsieur Le Mouse, you'll wear a different chain. Before you say another word, Javert, before you chain me up like a slave again, listen to me, there's something I must do. I may not be doing musical reviews right. Now, it didn't take long after Disney created his most famous character before the impact on the world of comics began. Mickey was the star of a newspaper strip by 1930, which added depth to the character, creating a rogues gallery including the Phantom Blot and longtime rival Mortimer Mouse, along with supporting characters like lawyer Sylvester Shyster and nephews Morty and Ferdy. Over the years, other Disney comic strips would come and go, including Donald Duck, Silly Symphonies, Uncle Remus, and even a comic based on the Gummy Bears. For a couple of decades, starting in 1960, seasonal comic strips featuring gatherings of Disney characters were offered for 3 weeks each year, leading up to Christmas. These stories featured interesting blends of characters such as Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather teaming up with Pinocchio to thwart Brer Bear and the Big Bad Wolf's plan to kidnap Santa Claus. Meanwhile, in 1933, Mickey Mouse Magazine was released, a treasury of children's entertainment featuring Mickey and other Disney characters, including text stories and comics, notably reprints of the various daily newspaper comics of the time. Eventually, it and Disney's comic book rights as a whole moved over to Western Publishing, better known for its most prolific imprint, Dell Comics. Mickey Mouse Magazine would eventually morph into Walt Disney's Comics and Stories, an anthology series that encapsulated the Disney universe. But titles for individual characters would emerge as well, mostly through issues of Dell's long-running tryout series, 4-Color Comics, which I really need to talk about in detail sometime, giving us such weirdness as Thumper Meets the Seven Dwarves, but also producing stories about nearly all of Disney's stable of characters existing at the time, from the top-of-the-line stars like Snow White and Goofy to Disney's second-string players. Welcome, monsieur. Sit yourself down and meet the best innkeeper in town. Still, Mickey Mouse may be Disney's most popular and important character, but when it comes to the world of Disney comics, one Disney star stands head and shoulders above the rest. Do you hear him? I can't do Donald. Cartoon Donald Duck is usually a hot-headed anti-hero who creates his own messes and continues to make them worse for himself. Comic book Donald Duck? Well, to quote Webigail Vanderquack,
Donald Duck is one of the most daring adventurers of all time!
Both Mickey and Donald comic stories had elements of adventure to them, but Donald's were often quite epic in scope, especially after the legendary Carl Barks took the reins. Barks, known by fans as the Good Duck artist before his name was ever even credited in the books, took Donald in bold directions and created an entire mythos. The list of things created by Barks for the comics that have become crucial to Donald's world is immense. The city of Duckburg, Uncle Scrooge, the Beagle Boys, Donald's detailed family tree, Gladstone Gander, Gyro Gearloose, the Junior Woodchucks. That scene you love from Raiders of the Lost Ark with the boulder, Spielberg was directly inspired by an Uncle Scrooge comic. A real-life method of raising sunken ships using inflated balloons was directly inspired by Donald Duck comics. Every day, man, we are out there making DuckTales. But as tempting as it is to talk about Donald Duck comics for the next 3 hours, the Duck universe wasn't the only thing comics contributed to Disney lore. The Silly Symphonies comic strip created protagonist Bucky Bug, who had a fairly prolific history in the comics, and Dell Comics created quite a bit more. Goofy's superhero alter ego Super Goof enjoyed a considerably long run in the comics. The Big Bad Wolf's nephew Little Bad Wolf likewise premiered in comics and had a long-running feature through various titles. Eventually, though, Dell's grip on Disney Comics fell to Western's new publishing arm, Gold Key, and by the 70s, the sale of Disney Comics were struggling in the US. In the 80s, rights were picked up by Gladstone Publishing, who kept it through the 90s. In 2003, Gladstone, revived as Gemstone Publishing, began producing the two most popular titles, Walt Disney's Comics and Stories and Uncle Scrooge, but that didn't last long. Since then, IDW has published a few comics, and Fantagraphics have produced excellent reprints of Carl Barks' Duck stories, along with those by his successor, Don Rosa. Meanwhile, overseas, Disney Comics flourished, especially in Denmark and Italy, and new stories are in constant production, which brings us to Inducks. INDUCKS, all caps, periods after each letter, the International Network of Disney Universe Comic Knowers and Sources. This online database catalogs every single Disney comic story ever produced, with country of origin, creator credits, and a unique product code for each story, which you can cross-reference to find reprints of that story. Even those relatively rare comic book appearances by Winnie the Pooh. A.A. Milne's characters were a glowing inspiration to a young Disney, and Disney went on to inspire generations since. And that is Christopher Robin's Golden Age influence. Life is like a hurricane when you are here in our Duckburg. Race cars and lasers, aeroplanes, it is a virtual duck blur. We might solve a mystery or rewrite history, regale. Every day we're out here making our duck tales. Will you give all you can give so that our banner may advance? Some will fall and some will live, will you?